Okay, so I want to talk about what I believe the causes of autism are. Okay, I believe autism is it's basically being caused by mostly a if you don't use it, you lose it type of situation, right? If you don't use your legs in a sense, right? Like say a bedridden patient, they're gonna atrophy in a sense. And autism is basically like this sort of lack of sort of social wiring or functions or components of a person. Okay. And that's because we stopped using it. So those parts of ourselves started to atrophy. I believe this sort of started with modernity, to be honest. Basically, it's in the beginning, it shifted from when like mothers used to keep their babies very close to them early on. And then we started putting them into cribs. That's when that sort of social wiring um, and functions started to atrophy, right? Um, and I think actually in the beginning that was okay on some level because we can basically like um, not self domesticate ourselves, but that would make us more independent. We would evolve to be more independent, right? But I feel like we've taken it too far because it started with that, right? The babies used to be strapped to the mother very closely, this and stuff, and then we've started becoming more remote from babies, like um, right, wrapping them in all this clothing, putting them in a crib the whole night, that type of thing. Not no skin to skin contact type of thing or social interaction heavily. Okay, and then we started shifting into like um, these schools, right, where these children are basically like in or on these benches or in these chairs where it's very sort of isolated, separate society, right? We started becoming more and more socially disconnected, which is going to start causing that social atrophication, okay, or some components or aspects of it. Um, okay. And then that was already mixing with where it's like almost in certain countries, this is more of a North American perspective, but um there was this thing where so kids very separate, like kids used to be more like, wrestling and playing and that type of thing, socializing, right? Playing, socializing. But then they started being, you know, in these chairs focused on this one teacher where you only get to socialize during like recess and lunch type of thing. And there's already this sort of stigma or taboo or something where we don't like when guys touch each other or something. Like, look, even children, young people started having less physical contact and that. In addition to that, less socializing, right? Which we started to sort of some those components of socializing started to atrophy. Okay, and then we genetically pick up on that, and that's going to start being passed down genetically, right? Just adapting whatever our bodies are like. Oh, you want that? Okay, we'll download that into your genes or whatever. Okay, and then there was this thing where it's like everyone started being more isolated. I mean, like these sort of researchers, that sort of trope where it's like the scientist in his office surrounded by papers, right? We started having these more sort of physically and socially isolated professions and careers, okay? Where we were in these sort of um, boxes, right? It's almost this prison like feeling where like when in jail we already talk about has these social impacts when they're like in these jail cells, or like what's that thing where they like put those people in isolation and they come out like, awkward, and like it has that sort of more immediate social atrophication when we're putting these people in, like, I forgot what it's called, but they isolate that person in like this little room or something. But you could find that in society more and more, just from work and professions and that type of thing. And then there's also still that stigma or taboo, like how guys don't, like, guys can be walking next to each other, and if their hair's brush, people find that awkward or weird. That's homophobia type of thing, where everything's gay type of thing. Like, like in some countries, like how guys will hold hands and that type of thing. But in different places, that's more taboo and stigmatized, where we just have this weird relationship with social contact and that type of thing, which all of those things increase that sort of social atrophication. Okay. And a lot of people with autism, they have issues with um, sort of socially connecting, picking up on social cues. Of course we would, because we basically stopped doing that on some level, which is going to be passed down, you know, genetically. Okay. And then I feel like this was sort of increased, enhanced, and accelerated with the invention of, uh, artificial light. Okay. Especially fluorescent lights. Okay. So we're isolated in these cubes and that type of thing. But now we're being bathed in this um, fluorescent light. Like, I don't even really this is only on because of the video. Like, I try to avoid fluorescent light because um I feel as if that, like, there's already all these studies that says that it affects our nervous system and that type of thing. This just accelerated our sort of disconnection. Okay. Um it's like it's interfering with our biology, it's interfering with our nervous system, where and then autistic people have a lot of issues with their nervous system. um I mean, it's almost like this area where it's pulling us towards this sort of digital digitization of ourselves, where we're more, socially um, disconnected. It's interfering with that more organic processes and expressions, literally based on these different studies, where it's just sort of interfering with the processes of our nervous system. And our bodies are going to be like, our bodies will take that as anything. They will try to adapt to anything. Our bodies are saying like, oh well, I guess you want that, so we will imprint that and we will pass that down into your genes. Okay. Basically, this sort of very hyper modern artificial lifestyles, I believe, is the source, of autism, or what we call autism. Okay. And um right, very much the education industry, artificial lights, and then also that's probably have been enhanced by a lot of these like artificial foods that also interfere with our nervous system. Because then you see this with how autistic people are more sensitive, like that will really throw things into a disarray. These different chemicals and additives or fluorescent lights. So if that really sort of enhances those aspects of autism, but we've been exposed to these things for centuries now. So why wouldn't it help? Why wouldn't it cause it? Okay. Um. So um, that's how what I see about autism, but that's not happening in a vacuum, right? That's just kind of actually that's one aspect of a lot of this very sort of, I know, society is just becoming more, almost robotic and mechanical and unhealthy, right? That's, it just has to do with all these other factors as well. But I just wanted to talk about that aspect of it, right? I believe we should stop. Uh, we're going to see that fluorescent lights, blue light, whatever you want to call it, is very detrimental to us. And I believe the current education system should basically be abolished. Like, it should basically be inverted. Right now it's this sort of focus on like almost trivial factoids, um just memorizing content, much of it with no practical application, when young people are naturally wired to play, and that's what should primarily be like. Instead, it should be like 80% like, you know physical activity of some sort that matches that person's personality, and like practical skills and that type of things. Like, school should, this new whatever it would be, is just look more like scouts or something, um, that type of thing, and then more practical skills, okay, and playing and sleeping and socializing. Like, not 80% physical activity, but there should be a lot more like so-called recess. That should be a big chunk of it. Lunch, breakfast, lunch should be, that should be doubled or tripled. Okay, where people can, you know, talk and socialize and that type of thing, um, and play, which is what kids are wired to do. But also spaces for people who are like, lean introverted, who are not interested in that. Places and rooms for them, and you know, but then also more practical skills and more emphasis on like creativity than just memorizing, like learning about photosynthesis and history, which 90% of history is like fictional, semi fictional, or unreliable or irrelevant. You know what I mean? Or like repetitively learning, learning math. Okay. And then there should be less taboo for like social contact between people. Um, that type of thing. And like, even if you're a guy, an adult, hold hands with another guy. Like, that's another thing where it's like, it's been socially sanctioned that you can only have like affection or social contact with like a romantic partner, when that's not always like possible or reliable. Like, a lot of men just try to have sex. They actually just are seeking like affection or social contact, but that's like sometimes it almost feels like men feel like it's gay to even hold a woman's hand, and that toxic insanity type of thing, but it's true. Right, a lot of guys are just basically like socially handicapped, but that's another story. So yeah, that's my take on this.